Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. I know you're all gradually working your way through the week. It's Thursday. Thursday is Trivia Day in my world. And the special category for trivia today where I go, if I talked about this now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I should mention this if any of you ever want to run into me somewhere. If you live in the Tampa area, you can find me every Thursday evening at Fat Cat Tavern in Largo, Florida. You can just type that into your GPS to find it. And my trivia team, our name this time for this season is called Intellectually Frisky, which is kind of funny. Last season, our name was Angry Nerds. We meet, get together at 7 o'clock at Fat Cat Tavern every Thursday. If you'd like to meet me, run into me, maybe argue with me or something like that, I can be found there pretty much every Thursday for about the last 4 years. So, and they have a special category every week. It's the beer round, where any team that wins that round gets a free pitcher of beer. I don't drink, so me answering the questions, I'm just trying to help my teammates out. But the beer category this week is American history. We should do fairly well. We have a lot of people on our team, including myself, that are pretty good with American history. I did have a chance to go out and play disc golf for the first time in 4 months yesterday. And the old 45-year-old body went along with it pretty fine. Today, though, feeling it a little bit, especially considering that I've been lifting weights for a while. I don't know if I'm going to continue to get back to playing disc golf, and I think that's my plan. At least when I can, and go to a couple tournaments, not playing as much as I did last year. I'm going to have to find a happy medium between lifting weights and disc golf because they don't seem to want to go together. At least when you're 45 years old. If I was 25 years old, maybe that would be just fine. 45, I think it's a little much, especially for my left shoulder to take. As if you don't know, I'm left-handed. Athletically left-handed. I write right-handed, eat right-handed. But athletically, throw a baseball, shoot basketball, play disc golf, left-handed. Go figure that out. But it was fun. I went out with a good friend of mine. His name's Cameron, and just to go out and play. But he's also helping me with my technique because I need some improvement. He's a very good player, so I appreciate him. Not just being a good friend, which he's been for about 3 years, but also helping me, trying to help me get better at playing disc golf. So we had a great time. I actually didn't even really shoot too badly for not playing in 4 months. So let's get to the show. It seems like this is popping up more and more in the show where I'm combining different stories. They're completely different stories written by completely different people on completely different sites. I know that none of these writers know what the other is writing, but when I read them, even though they're on different topics, I see a connection between all of them, and I try to bring across those connections on the show. And I think that's why recently it seems to me that I've been going from story to story, kind of blending one right into the other instead of just outright saying, okay, we're done with that. And I say we're done with that topic, but it'll seem like it's just a carry over to the next topic. It's not like I'm talking about Donald Trump, and then I break from that, and I talk about North Korea, and then from North Korea, I go to some other totally different topic. It seems like it all blends together. Well, today I'm going to be blending this story about Ben Shapiro. He wrote this story called, what is the name? Unless a Miracle Occurs, Never Trump. all right, that he wrote in National Review. And I want to combine that with a couple other articles and then something that a friend of mine wrote to me. And I know he's been listening, and I think he even knows that I kind of use his conversations as springboards for many of the topics I cover on here, because I know that this friend of mine who got me into politics originally, way back 25 years ago, is very in tune. I take him to be somewhat your average conservative, probably not as conservative as I am, or as I've grown to be, but when he says things, I know that many other conservatives are probably thinking the same way. All right, that's the way I think I know this guy. And also on top of the fact that he tends to be a little bit more involved in the work that he does and has done, and being in business atmospheres and being around a lot more people. Whereas me, I've told you, I'm a little bit antisocial. But he sent me a message yesterday saying how he thinks that Newt Gingrich is going to be, there's a good chance that Newt Gingrich is going to be Donald Trump's vice presidential pick. And I wrote back to him, don't you think that's a little too establishment? Even though I for the record, as I've told you, back in 2012, I voted for Newt Gingrich in the primaries. I did not vote for Mitt Romney. Although I did end up voting for Mitt Romney in the general election, it is not something that I would do again if I had the choice. But I did it. And that's why when I brought up yesterday about rhyming the Ancient Mariner and being part of the crime, I admit for several years I was part of the crime. I don't want to do that anymore. But this friend of mine said that to me, and I wrote back to him, don't you think that Newt Gingrich is maybe a little too inside for Donald Trump? A little too established, considering that Donald Trump is supposed to be the outsider, and that's the way people continue to portray, his supporters continue to portray him. I don't necessarily think that way. I think he's as insider can get. But other people don't think that way. And then a friend of mine wrote back to me, and granted, my friend is not picking this out of the air somewhere. That's been a conversation that's been going on, but this friend of mine, who I know very, very well, that he would write something like that, then he sees some truth to it, and probably he's thinking that it's very well true as well. He writes back to me, he thinks that, this friend of mine said, I don't think that he can go too outsiderish. And I just really just had to be blunt with my friend at the time. And this friend of mine, he knows how I am. I can be a little sarcastic, and he and I have known each other, and he can give as good as he can take, and I think I can give as good as I can take from him. And I don't know if you've been paying attention, but there's been a lot of things that people say Trump can't do that he's done. So saying he can't do something is kind of strange to me. The truth is, he's broken just about every rule that can be broken regarding running for office. And really, that's one of the reasons that so many people have been drawn to him. Okay? And it's one of the frustrations, and that's one of the things that's so scary about this, that the actual policies don't matter. It's just the public perception. It's his personality, willing to say anything, willing to do anything, which is not something that I think our founding fathers would have been a fan of. It's the exact reason they were fearful of a straight democracy, because they knew that somebody could win an office based on nothing but personality alone, because that's the way humans are. And so that's why we have electoral college. That's why the states vote for president. People don't. So I pointed this out to him, to this friend of mine. And I also added on top of that, what would make you think that Trump would pick anybody of any intelligence whatsoever? See, this is another point that is bothersome to me. We see the selections that he have made so far, and they're not exactly the most sparkling ones. Are they? I made the point months ago, and I'm not the only person. I wasn't even the first person to say this. He had an opportunity to pick any person he wanted to be a spokesman. Donald Trump picked Katrina Pearson. He picked anybody who could be his campaign manager. He picked Corey Lewandowski. He could pick anybody he wanted. To be what's this position called that he gave to Chris Christie? He could pick anybody he wanted for that position. He picked Chris Christie. So, given all of that, what would make you think that he would vote or he would pick a guy who has been a conservative icon going way back to the contract with America like Newt Gingrich? Now, I know what Newt's been saying. I do research for this show. I know that he's been saying some very flattering things about Donald Trump. I think Newt's wrong. But it doesn't matter what Newt thinks. It only matters what Donald Trump thinks. And I'm sure he will take Newt Gingrich's support. But it is not within Donald Trump's behavior to pick smart conservatives. Okay? He'll take their support, and we're going to get to that other part of this in a second about conservative support. He'll take their support and everything, but he's not going to put somebody like that in a position of power. I would also add that Newt Gingrich, how long do you think a guy like Newt Gingrich is going to be able to be vice president to Donald Trump? Really? Given what we know about Newt Gingrich, I would say that would be one of the weirdest combinations of president and vice president probably since JFK and Lyndon Johnson, I would say. That's something that we have to, that's be a bizarre situation, and we know that JFK only did that to lock up some southern states. And there are the rumors out there, of course, for those conspiracy theorists for JFK and who shot him, that the reason LBJ had something to do with JFK assassination because JFK was going to dump him when JFK ran for re-election in 1964. There is that rumor out there if you're into that stuff. So a Donald Trump-Newt Gingrich combo would be very, very strange, on top of the fact that that's just not the kind of people that Donald Trump picks. And as much as I have been making fun of all of this, maybe there's just a part of me that really can't see Newt Gingrich accepting, because he probably knows he's going to get caught up in defending some things that he's been fighting against for decades. So there's that. I'd also add something else. There's no reason that Donald Trump needs to pick Newt Gingrich to try to pull in more conservatives. There's that talk out there too. Well, he's going to need something to kind of unify people, and Newt Gingrich is a conservative. He's with the Contract America. He got a lot of respect in 2012. He's a well-known conservative. That would be the perfect thing. Being that Newt's already out there saying nice things about Donald Trump, that would be the perfect selection. And to that I say, why does Donald Trump have to do that anyway? The truth is, already, and we talked about it, 2 days ago, We already have well-known conservatives who are governors of states or ex-governors of states or UN ambassadors. Wasn't that what John Bolton was? We already have prominent conservatives who are coming out to throw their support behind Donald Trump. No matter, just already. So why would Donald Trump be motivated to pick Newt Gingrich to conservatives when conservatives are already being traitors, in my opinion, and already jumping on the Trump train? There's no reason. There's no reason. Now, I told you this all got started. What got me thinking about this was this email from a friend of mine, but it also, once again, from this Ben Shapiro article. Because Ben Shapiro is part of the Never Trump crowd, just like I am, just like many conservatives are. And so his article seems a little bizarre to me. See, this is one of those reasons that sometimes Ben Shapiro, I've told you, there's a hard time. I have a hard time trying to understand why he gets all of the attention that he does. I'm just going to be honest. The things that he writes and says a lot of it is true. I don't know how new it is, though. I've always based my opinion on whether somebody should get a lot of attention or not based on the uniqueness of their arguments for conservatism. Not if they can keep dishing out the same stuff that's been said about conservatism over and over and over for 100 years. That's why I think when I come to this show, I'm trying to find new ways to talk about conservatism, because obviously we need it. Obviously. But he comes out with this article saying, unless miracle occurs, never Trump. I have to ask Ben a question. Do we have to be that? Do we have to draw that fine of a line? Do we have to give ourselves an out like that? Because I guess the reason that he's saying this is because he's running into people. He's getting emails, getting asked on Twitter, well, what happens? You're in the Never Trump train. You're in the Never Trump crowd. Well, what happens if tomorrow Donald Trump wakes up and he starts saying who his cabinet's going to be, and it's going to be all of these conservatives and all these positions, Secretary of Defense, and he's going to get some Austrian economist to run the Fed, and this and that. Are you still going to be Never Trump? This is the only reason that I could ever see that a prominent person in conservative media could write an article like this. That's the only reason. Well, the simple truth to all of that is it's not going to happen. That's why there's no reason to write an article about it. But maybe, it was at National Review. Maybe he was due for an article. He was going up against the deadline. Maybe there's some other reasons that he wrote this article. But do we have to draw that fine of a line? What this sounds to me? This sounds like the woman, the wife who's been beaten and her husband's cheating on her and all of these things, and she's talking to her friends. She goes, I'm leaving him. And the friends are like, well, even if he changes his ways, and then she starts to think, well, you know what? If he does this and he does that, meanwhile, the guy's been beating her and cheating on her for 20 years, and then she actually starts thinking about how he could change. She doesn't have the courage just to come out and say to her friends, you know what, ladies? I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah, I've been the wrong person here. I should have dumped this guy a long time ago. But asking me this? This is just some type of theoretical question. You don't actually believe this is going to happen. Is this just some test of me? Really? So that's what it seems like to me. Expecting some, what's the cliche? Leopard to change his spots, or is that something like that? I mean, I don't know if I've ever used that. I've heard the saying, but I don't know if I've ever said that before. Leopard changing his stripes, or tiger changing his stripes, leopard changing his spots. I don't know. See, it's this kind of thinking that I think that Bobby Jindal and Rick Perry and those other guys, to mention from a couple days ago, have gotten caught up in as well. They don't want to be seen as never Trump people, and then Trump surprise them. They'd rather be seen as then on the outside and flip-flopping. Instead, they're going to use cover of wanting to go along with whoever the GOP is and stay inside the house instead of getting kicked outside of the house. I think. Where some of us, I think, are just comfortable in being outside of the house. There's also the fact that even if, when I say that on this show, I have to be honest about something. When I use the term "even if," I think back to the Dr. Laura show. Of course, she's not. I don't know what she's doing these days, but back in the day, she had that relationship show. All the liberals hated her. I somewhat enjoyed the show. It got to me after a while, but women would call in and they'd say things. Well, my husband's doing this, and my kids are doing that, and Dr. Laura would answer the question, and then invariably, it was almost like it was part of a script. The caller would say, even if he or even if my kids, and Dr. Laura would just cut him off right there. Yes, even if the world ends tomorrow, and even if... People are always looking for an out. They're looking for that exception, because really what is behind that even if scenario is, well, I know what you're telling me is right, but I really don't want to do it, and I just want to cure my conscience. That's really what behind an even if. It's like battered wind. It really is, and probably some of these women that called into our show were battered women, unfortunately. But still looking for a way to be loyal. Because usually it was Dr. Laura was saying, well, you need to leave this guy, and probably in telling this woman things that she doesn't want to do, even though the woman, the caller, knows what Dr. Laura is saying is right. So really what the even if question is, I'm really looking for a reason to keep doing what I'm doing. That's really what the even if question is. And so that's the way it feels here. Ben Shapiro, I'm sure he's not the only one. I haven't gotten any. Maybe because I've been such a strong never Trump person, and I you know what I've said about him, and you know the kind of person I think he is. I don't get any of that on Twitter or in my email. I think people pretty much know that I'm not changing my ways. And I tend to be more of a doubting Thomas than the average person anyway, not just in politics, but in anything. I'm much more cynical about people's motives and why people change their behavior and things like that. I guess it should be no surprise that being raised Roman Catholic, when I got my confirmation, whenever that happens, like when you're 15, 16 years old, something like that, my confirmation name was Thomas. I picked that out, so that shouldn't be any surprise. But the Ben Shapiro writes this and has to make it an article in National Review. Maybe just shows how battered as we as conservatives have become. This psychological, trip that we've been on. not just with Donald Trump, but with the Republican Party and supporting it and trying to change it from within, which I think is still the best choice. But you can't do that by continuing to vote for presidents who aren't conservative. You can try it for a while. That's been a mistake. At some point, a message has to be delivered. But it was just strange to me to read that article and sit there and say, I don't think he's going to change. Can't we just say that? I feel this way like when I talk about Obamacare. If it was really about everybody having universal health coverage, it would just say government pays for everything. If it was truly about health care, that's all it would have to say. Likewise, when the topic is Donald Trump and whether we're going to support him or not, depending on who he selects as his vice president and who he says he's going to make this defense secretary and the rest of it, can't we just say we don't believe him? Can't we just say that's not going to happen? Can't we just stake out our territory in knowing that? Right? Are we so afraid of being wrong? The truth is, it seems that a lot of people are rejecting us anyway. Well, at least if we're going to lose, let's lose on principle. Let's not lose by hedging our bets and trying to play if there's a 1% chance, then we gotta make make preparations for that. We got to give ourselves outs if this happens in August or September. So it just seems like a very weird article to me. But I think that reading it makes me feel, I think that is, this friend of mine who emailed me, they kind of feel like the same thing to me. That, well, you know what, there's still this chance that Trump might wake up. That's what the basis, I think, is for this email from this friend of mine. I think it was the basis for this Ben Shapiro article, and I think it's the basis for a lot of these conservatives, well-known conservatives, who are now getting behind Donald Trump. There's still that chance. And, of course, it's also motivated by a totally irrational fear of Hillary Clinton. I know she's terrible. Totally irrational. And I think we're going to talk about Hillary Clinton in relation to Donald Trump here in a bit. So, just some odd articles being written about this. You know, I think are there really enough conservatives fearful out there that they're saying, never Trump, never Trump, never Trump, and then but in the back of their head really thinking, well, what if he picks all these great conservatives to be in his cabinet, and he says he's going to take suggestions from them, and he's going to admit that he doesn't know as much as some of these conservatives, and he's going to take their word. And does anybody believe that? If you say you don't believe that, then this article doesn't need to be written. But maybe Ben Shapiro just needed the paycheck. I've got about a half minute before I move on. But in the next part, after the break, I'm going to go to another National Review article, and this is written by Charles C.W. Cook. And it has to do with how do we as conservatives go forward in maintaining our credibility in the wake of all of these conservatives who have now jumped on to the Trump train. That's going to be a problem that's going to pop up. We think we have an election problem. We have other problems going on, but I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And we are back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to get back to one more thing maybe about the Newt Gingrich, Donald Trump possibility. I know that it's been I saw in the break that that on Bloomberg, Trump is thinking about making Newt Gingrich his vice presidential pick. And I'm sure this is the place where my friend saw this, but I think this talk has been out there for a while. Would his true supporters support that? I hate putting words like that together, but would they go along with that? We think that we know about them, not those people who, I know that the people who have kind of flip-flopped, been Cruz supporter, now Trump supporter, Rubio supporter, now Trump supporter, Kasich supporter, now Trump supporter. I know that they would go along with it. But those people who have been showing up to vote for Donald Trump since January, would they accept Newt Gingrich? Would they? See, my impression is they wouldn't. Now, I'm sure some of them will try to put their own spin on it because a lot of them are kooks, but wouldn't this be kind of like Jim Jones saying, you know what? I'm going to add somebody to my cult. This is my religious cult. We're moving from San Francisco down to French Guiana or wherever that was in South America. And I think we're going to need some additional Christian support to lend to our credibility. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make this Catholic priest my right-hand man. That's what it would be like for Donald Trump to make Newt Gingrich his vice presidential running mate. Once again, I suppose it can happen. I'm just trying to look at it as logically, as rationally as I can. Had Jim Jones done that in his cult in the late 70s, do you think he would have continued to have a cult like a month later? Would that not have broken the spell? All these people who thought that Jim Jones would deliver the next Jesus, who knows what they thought. New kind of guy, love and peace and everything. I mean, the reason that those people got caught up in Jim Jones is because they were rejecting all of these other established denominations of Christianity. And then he goes and makes a Catholic priest his right-hand man. It would certainly break the spell, wouldn't it? So wouldn't Newt Gingrich, an appointment as Newt Gingrich as Donald Trump's running mate, would that not break the spell for a lot of people? Now, I know maybe they'll go back. I mean, I know what they're going to say. They're going to say, well, yeah, but look, you going back to 1994, there's a lot of Republicans that like him. Yeah, you're going to have to admit something. A lot of people who voted for Donald Trump in the last few months don't give a dang about the contract with America. All right? They don't. And let's not forget, Newt Gingrich was a fan of NAFTA, right? Free trade between countries. Now, how do you think that is going to square with what Donald Trump allegedly wants to do with Mexico, China, Japan, and everybody else? I just want to know. What do you think is going to happen there? I think that I have to believe at this point this is all talk. I have to believe that. And when it happens, and if it happens, we'll take a look at it. But politically, it's hard to understand. Knowing Donald Trump the way I do, it's hard to understand. The way I know Newt Gingrich, it's hard to understand. Knowing what I think each guy stands for, it's hard to understand. Because once again, I'm going to add, he doesn't need to add Newt Gingrich to his ticket to get conservative votes. Why? Because a lot of conservatives are already going on over to Donald Trump. So he's free to do whatever he wants. I guess what conservatives are showing is, man, they're fairly easy. They are a cheap date. If you're going to switch, you could at least try to hold out and make sure he made a good vice presidential selection. Nope, they just went to, we got to unify the party. Went right over there in no time, overnight. Speaking of that, though, and this is the reason I think this Charles C.W. Cook article at National Review is relevant, is that what has happened in the last few days with all of these conservative, well-known conservative leaders, people who have office or run for office, and them suddenly going on to the Donald Trump, jumping on the Trump train, it has shortened the political bench for conservatives overnight. I'm not sure that Bobby Jindal and Rick Perry and Rand Paul understand the damage that they have done to themselves for their bases. See, and that's the whole other part of it. Whoever you think Donald Trump's base is, those, as I've called them, cultists that got on, that jumped on with Donald Trump last summer, and maybe probably were even fans of his beforehand. Maybe they're, watched The Apprentice for years and years and years. Who knows? Whoever you think that base is, that is not the base for Bobby Jindal. All right? It's not the base for Rand Paul. It is not the base for Rick Perry. It's just not. Now, I'm not saying that those three guys and others wouldn't like to get some of those Trump people votes. I'm not saying that. What I'm talking about is the majority of supporters who have showed up to vote for Donald Trump are not the same people who are the majority, have the same traits as the majority of people who have show up in Louisiana, Kentucky, Texas for those other conservatives. That's a big problem. Now, if I know it, then doesn't Bobby Jindal know it? Don't Rick Perry and Rand Paul and now Marco Rubio, I guess, too. Don't these guys know it, too? Because I know it. But what they've done is, by them switching over, and I mean, not just going against their word, what they called Donald Trump while they were still in the race, not just that. I mean, that's bad enough as it is, flip-flopping. But now, don't they understand that they've weakened themselves, too? All of this time that they've put in over the years trying to build up conservative base and trying to do conservative things in their states, don't they know that they've blown it in one fell swoop in supporting Donald Trump? Do they not realize that? All for the sake of the party, which isn't even that conservative. As I try to point out, the reason that you have, for example, a House of Representatives and a Senate that doesn't do much conservative stuff is because I've tried to tell all of you, most of the senators and representatives who are there are not totally conservative. I've told you, if you go to conservativereview.com and look at the ratings for all of the representatives and senators, you find that the average rating for a Republican in there, they're about 60% conservative. It goes in the 60 to 65% range. Yeah, Ted Cruz is up in the 90s. Mike Lee's up in the 90s. David Bratt, I think, gets a perfect 100% rating, but your average representative or senator is in the 60-some% range. You know why? Because that's probably where the Republican Party as a whole is. As a whole, from state to state to state. Now, in Louisiana, I'm sure it's much more conservative. In Texas, it's much more conservative. In Kentucky, more conservative, maybe not as conservative as those other two states, because remember, you're mixing in a lot of representatives and some senators who come from states that are otherwise somewhat purplish or blue. The way I see Donald Trump, though, is if he had a conservative review rating, he's down in the 30s, probably. Who knows? But he's probably at least down in the 30s. Like, given who he's given money to over the years, what he said about abortion, what he said about all these different issues, you'd say that his rating is down in the 30s, but you have some governors of states whose conservative review ratings are probably in the 80s at least, who are saying, yeah, we're going to support the guy whose rating is in the 30s. That can only hurt the guy, that can only hurt the politician who's in the 80s. And so that's what Charles C.W. Cook is saying, is that in just one overnight, there was a year ago we were looking at, look at all these different great choices that we have. Not all totally conservative, but it's a nice mixture. We can have some good policy discussions, all of this. Donald Trump came in, changed all of it. And we were talking about a year ago about this deep bench, all these young guys and women, if they want to jump into, who are in their 40s, into their 50s. Whereas look at the Democrats, they're putting up a couple 70-year-olds. And then what do? We're going to nominate our own 70-year-old. We're going to nominate our own 70-year-old squish/liberal to go right along with them. And then all of these other guys that we spoke so well about a year ago now want to go along with it. It's kind of like, you know what it's kind of like? It reminds me of the Pittsburgh Pirates, who for so many years couldn't get a winning season. They went 20 years from 93 through 2012 without a winning season, and then they started getting good again in 2013. What did they do? They would trade away prospects. The ownership was terrible. The management was terrible. They made a lot of bad draft decisions. But then the players that they did have, they'd give them away for cash. Just give them away. Pirates would just trade away. Well, we're not going to do anything this year, so we might as well. I mean, if you went through and looked at all of the great players that the Pirates gave away over the years, you could put together a pretty good all-star team. This is going back, like I said, almost 20 years. You know, like Jose Bautista, the home run hitter for the Toronto Blue Jays? He started in the Pirates organization. Pirates gave him away. How about that? And there are several examples like that. Just gave him away. Now, in the case of the Republican Party and these individual candidates, there are these governors, for example, these people have chosen to leave on their own, which is worse than being traded. I mean, these players who are in the Pirates organization, they get traded away. What can they do about it? They can't do anything. It wasn't their choice to leave. Maybe some of them were happy about it, but it wasn't their choice. These governors, these other guys, John Bolton is not a governor, but these prominent conservatives who now made different decisions, made a different choice regarding Donald Trump, they're doing it on their own. And that's why I'm not sure. Do they not understand how deep the conservative frustration is with Donald Trump? Are they that out of touch? Is their fear of Hillary Clinton that bad? I don't know. I don't know. But in twofold, it's hurt our bench. It seems like now we have to restock. I guess we have Ben Sass and a few others that can take over that mantle now. We'll see. We'll see if Ben Sass and some of these other guys and women can, I guess Nikki Haley is also a Never Trump person. We'll see if they can stick to their guns between now and November. We'll see. I hope they do. If they don't, we'll remember. But this is now not just a time where conservatives, start thinking about, well, why did this happen? And was it our ideas? What was it? Was it this? Was it that? We also have to start looking for new political leaders. Because the ones that we have, for the most part, have sold us out. Is Scott Walker going to sell us out too? Most importantly, is Ted Cruz going to sell us out too? Is he going to jump on the Trump train too and effectively end his political career? Now, he'll probably still be able to get reelected in Texas just because, but national aspirations, I mean, those guys have to understand that, right? That if they choose to want to run for president in 2020, 2024, 2028, some of them are not that old. They could probably go for the next run for the next 20 years. They have to understand that eventually there are going to be politicians who are going to run against them who are conservative, who didn't go along with Donald Trump, and those politicians are going to be thought of as better. And, of course, we're going to know what kind of president Donald Trump was by that time, if he even gets to be president. We're going to know. And at least we'll know what kind of campaign he ran when he didn't have to run against anybody else in the Republican Party. We're going to find that out. So these are dark days. It's like I told the friend of mine that I talk politics with. These are dark days. Lots of bad things going on out there. But I think in these bad days, the last thing you want to do is get desperate and just grasp for anything. Because the truth is, grasping for Donald Trump is not going to save you. These guys obviously think it is. It's not. It only pulls them further into the abyss. Because Trumpism, whatever that is, cannot save the United States. Maybe for the short term, it can save these conservative politicians in the very short term, but in the long term, it is a loser. And not because I think I know Donald Trump, but because I think I know what the opposite of conservatism is, and that's what Donald Trump is selling. So we have to work on finding new leaders, new people who are willing to run for office and not sell out. It seems like we do a lot of that, isn't it? Moving on, I was looking at, I just saw something. I'm just looking down here at my notes. As I was writing my notes, can't believe I forgot this. And these people who are willingly, not by force, but willingly going over to now support Donald Trump after months of making fun of him and saying you aren't really going to give that guy the nuclear codes. And we know all of the statements that were made about Donald Trump, most of them true, by people who are now flipping over and saying we have to support Donald Trump. It reminded me, there's an episode in Star Trek, the original series, the one from the 60s with William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy. It was called A Taste of Armageddon. Have you seen it? Fascinating. One of my favorite episodes, along with the Doomsday Machine. That was another great episode. Some of the old episodes on the original series, a little shaky, but some of the ones they did right were awesome. And this is one of them. If you don't know what A Taste of Armageddon was, the Enterprise ends up at this planet, and it's allegedly supposed to be this planet where there's a war going on, but the Enterprise cannot sense any explosions, no missiles, no lasers, nothing. It seems like the planet is peaceful. They beam down. Everything seems to be perfectly fine until they see these people going into these kind of like telephone booths and then suddenly disappearing. And what has happened is that these two warring countries or continents have decided that instead of destroying each other's stuff, they have an agreement where it's all going to be played out on a computer. And when people are in an area that gets blown up virtually, those people then have to show up to have themselves exterminated. They willfully go and exterminate themselves to keep a peaceful society. And William Shatner, of course, and the rest of the crew, of course Leonard, of course Spock, of course can see some sort of twisted logic in it. The Enterprise, William Shatner, then go about destroying these booths that are exterminating these people and say, you want war? We'll give you war. And then you'll see the destruction and you'll see the death. And then maybe then you can then work out a true peace, P-E-A-C-E, and nobody will have to die anymore. But as long as you keep kidding yourselves and think that you're so civilized by doing this, you're never going to learn the lesson on why war should be avoided in the first place and what peace really means. In thinking about that episode, and it's been a while since I saw it, I'm not sure if I described it totally accurately or not, but there was that part about these people willingly going to destroy themselves that I saw an analogy for what a lot of conservatives are doing now. There is a war to be fought, a political war, not a real war with bullets, but there is a political war to be fought in this country, whether we like it or not. Remember, as I've told you, there is either a conservative United States or there is no United States. It's either one or the other. There is no such thing as a liberal United States. If we go totally liberal, totally socialist, this country will fall apart very quickly, as will the rest of the world. That is why the political war needs to be had. And as long as we keep kidding ourselves that we can put that war off or we can avoid it by changing our allegiances and willfully going along with people who we know are different than ourselves, is only leading us to destruction faster. And that's the point William Shatner, Captain Kirk, was trying to make in that particular episode. The only way people will stop dying is if you actually work out a real peace. The way you will work out a real peace is when people actually start being really hurt. Instead of trying to have something very clean, a clean war. And this is why I've tried to tell you that things have to get worse before they get better. People are going to have to feel some real pain before we can get things straightened out. The avoidance of pain, like what was going on in that episode, and I think some conservatives are trying to do now, the avoidance of pain only causes our civilization to get closer to destruction, not further away. Maybe we need our own little, when it comes to the political war between conservatism and liberalism, maybe we need a little taste of Armageddon for conservatives, those who want to be traitors, to know the big mistake that they're making. Instead, they just want to march off and believe that we can get off clean in all this. We can't. But I got to go. You can go to edwarddentzel.com and you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows there. YouTube, Podbean, Podomatic, SoundCloud. You can find my shows there as well. edwarddentzel.com/book. It's where you can download for free the first chapter of my next novel called The Comebacks. Find me on Facebook, LinkedIn. Email me, edwarddentzel@reagan.com. Follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.